Here we are at Longues-sur-Mer, and you can see it's another typical German gun emplacement, and once again it has not been destroyed. It's been hit, it's been damaged, but it hasn't been destroyed. Hence, we must assume that the guns weren't put out of action. You can see it's been well hit, but there's nothing of the destruction that you see on some of the other objects around. So these were incredibly solidly built. Incredibly solidly built.
This is one of the 4 guns here.
This gun was destroyed by detonation after D-Day. I'm not sure exactly how long after. It wasn't destroyed by air attack, but you can see the extent of the explosion. There's the base concrete, and there's part of the turning mechanism by the looks of it over there. There's damage to the inside because obviously the explosions come from the inside, and there's part of the gun barrel that's been blown out. Looking at the width of the bore, I would say that's a 21 centimetre, so that's part of the barrel, and another part of the gun is or barrel I should say, is laying here. Now I'm just going to go down and examine it. No, it hasn't got any rifling in there, so that's clearly not the barrel itself, but it is part of the gun when it was blown up and blown out there. But this is the barrel, and as I say, looking at the width of the bore on that, that looks about 21 centimetre, which would be in English terms 8 inch. This is an example of the gun that was completely destroyed at the other position. It is relatively well preserved. See the elevating gear there, and you can see the traverse mechanism at the bottom. The gun shield's got blast penetrations on it, so it would be shell fragments from explosions outside that have penetrated the shell. That's there to protect the crew, obviously. That looks like a sighting mechanism on the right. Here's the breech with an overhead shield on it, but it looks, from what I can see in judging it, that it's a 21 centimetre German naval gun on a land mount. Mechanism on the left here.
Well, I can get that out because when I mess about it, I'll bring the darkness and the contrast and everything.
We'll have a look at the barrel of this from the front in a moment. This is a relatively well preserved example. It's fortunate to be able to actually see it. A lot of these places don't have anything in them, or are so badly damaged internally that you can't imagine. But this one definitely shows you the interior of one of these Normandy bunkers that hasn't been damaged. And you can see internally the strength and thickness of these. This has obviously withstood external bombardment. You can see wood markings in here with the grain of the wood where it's been used to form the concrete in block sections so that it could be inserted with steel lint over. It's immensely strong. It's withstood. There are cracks and signs of damage, but the whole structure is intact. Front of the gun, and there's obviously the barrel. And muzzle there, you can see the rifle in there, the lads looking in, and I would say it's 21 centimetre. We will check it for accuracy to see what the guns were here. I haven't done the exploration that Joe has in terms of investigating this, but I'm just going from knowledge of gun calibers and so on. Okay, so that's now I believe I've realised what that chunk of metal was stuck in the ground. Like I said, it wasn't part of the gun barrel, it was. It looks like it's part of the recoil mechanism. You can see that there, and I think the mark on the top there is evident on that other piece that's stuck in the ground at the undergun turret. I'll go and check it out, and I will confirm that. I can do that when we go back to the car park. But yeah, it looks like that the reason it was smooth and thinner, as you can see is here the case, is because it's part of the recoil mechanism. This bunker's in the best condition of all. This is bunker number 3 by the looks of it, and it's in tremendously good condition. Having seen photographs now of the bombardment zone, the shell cover, you can see that none of the shells actually hit the bunkers, but there would have been a lot of blast damage around it. But this one particularly hasn't really been damaged at all. There's a few nicks out of it, but it's still in very serviceable condition, and you can see the gun itself is not actually, the shield, unlike the shield on number 2, hasn't suffered any damage, and this gun is still in position. Within German naval gunners these guns would have been manned, I'm sure, by German naval personnel firing naval guns out to sea. These are not army artillery. Mechanism on the side, this is better preserved than the other one. Sighting mechanism on the other side is the breech. Breech mechanism looks, yeah, that's the closer. Let's have a look. That breech is in better nick than the other one. Yeah, so the shell goes in from the left and then it's closed from the right. The platform on which the part of the crew would stand was decayed and rotted away, and the back area here is rotten, but it's in remarkably good condition considering it's 80 years old. Oh, there is some damage. There's some damage there. There's a bit of bomb splinter or shell splinter there, and the top's caved in as well. So it has caught a blast there, presumably when it was traversed, because this is traversed to the right. So when it was firing perhaps in the other direction or straight ahead, it's been exposed and has caught a blast. And the arrangement here behind is very, very identical to the other bunkers, insofar as you've got these compartments at the rear. This may be for protection, it could well be for storage of charges and so on in here to bring forward to the gun. These are almost surely a blast protection here, because you've got the alcove in which you could take cover. It's interesting, it's not going to be evident on this film, but you can see all of the wood grain in the concrete, in the slabs, where it's been used as a former. The wood has been used to form the concrete on site here. This hasn't been transported, all of this hasn't been transported. These positions have been made on site, bringing the raw materials in, but the blocks have been produced on site. As ever, animals, when this was built, seabirds, as you can see, webbed feet there, either ducks or gulls or whoever's got webbed feet in the area, actually walking about in the wet con when this was built. That cannot be subsequent, that's got to be from whenever this was built, between 1940 and 1944. It's tremendous. Animals never change, it must have been the same in medieval times. And you've got little birds' feet in the concrete. You can see the damage to the the gun shield on here. This is not a hit. This is shell or bomb splinters, but it's enough to kill and enough to do damage to the gun if it did penetrate. But there it is, and it's opened out on the top there. So that's taken a good blast from outside. But it isn't a hit, otherwise it would have just blown it to bits. I'm standing in front of the gun position, and this would be what they'd be firing at. The Allied Navy, whether it be Americans or British warships, were out there firing in an arcing fire onto these positions, so several miles. They'd have the range, of course, but the problem they had was the trajectory was arced. It was a parabola. The lighter ships would have had the ability to actually try to get shells on the front of the bunkers to knock them out. It's notable that the notice board has the nice spin that says the bunkers were silenced and subsequently captured. Well, that is reading between the lines there, of course. That means that they weren't knocked out. None of these bunkers were knocked out. So it's a testament to the immensity, which I continue to stress, of these fortifications. You are not going to knock them out unless you've got weapons that can actually fire in the front and hit through the embrasure and blow up the crew and the gun and everything else. So they have to be silenced, which they were. They were put under suppressing fire, and then eventually, after hours, the crews capitulated, and they were taken prisoner by enemy troops coming through from the rear. There's a cracking shot of the bunker housing that gun position, and you will note there is no substantial damage on the exterior, so it didn't get hit, and that is interesting because all around would have been, I've seen photographs, it's heavily shelled, it's heavily bombarded, but they didn't manage to hit the bunker, and certainly not the front of it. Has got it's completely serviceable. So here is casemate number 4, and again, it's intact. It's utterly intact. It's got
Inside of that is complete.
Slight superficial damage. It hasn't been hit, and it tells you, again, it tells its own story that the German crews, although they surrendered, they hadn't been forced to surrender. They weren't destroyed. They were not destroyed. The 3 guns are ample evidence of the fact that the guns weren't destroyed. They were silenced but not destroyed, and they were subsequently captured because the crews had the right ump and didn't want to carry on. They were probably shell-shocked, fed up, browned off and overawed by the whole experience. But it wasn't knocked out, and they were fighting back during the initial phases. They did fight back. So interesting stuff. The platforms are far, far better preserved here. They haven't rotted away. So you can see the position. I'm going to get in there and have a look. I'm now inside the gun position. And here's a view out that a German gunner would have had. You can see the barrel of the gun out there as well. Yeah, that's the view of a German gunner looking out before the gun is fired. This is it's difficult to see in this light, but this is the shield, an intact shield. This hasn't been damaged, so this is the intact shield. This would give at least a good sense of security to gunners that are inside some iron protection. This is inside the massive concrete. So here's the rear end of the gun, the breech. Back out on the platform. Just going to go around the other side just for the sheer hell of it. And then there's a view out. You can see the sea just over the tusset of the grass. All seized levers and pistons and elevating devices and so on. Yeah, fascinating stuff. It's great. It's tremendous to see something like this preserved. Really tremendous, and it's been here for more than 80 years because it was installed. I'm not sure when these were installed. We'll do some more research when we get back, and we'll put that information up on stills on the video itself. I've done some checking, and these guns are in fact 15cm Krupp KC-36 cannon. They are indeed naval guns, and they had a rate of fire of 6 shells per minute. The range is 19.5 kilometres, so that's quite important. But they're 15cm and not 21cm as I had imagined. They look wider than 15cm, but anyway, than 21cm. No, I was right, they look wider than 15cm, they look 21. Anyway, but they're still powerful guns that could do a lot of damage to particularly ships inshore. So the small regular squares looking indentations, I believe, are for fixing camouflage netting onto this, and there would have also been earth banked up in front. It wouldn't have been as open as that, so the amount of space to get a shell into would have been quite small. Incredibly well protected. Here we are late in the day on the British Gold Beach, and I believe this is the K sector, and it is the far right of the British landing forces. Gold is the furthest west, then you've got Juno in the middle and Sword to the east. So we're starting here this afternoon. If we don't finish the British beaches today, I believe we will. Joe's just striding off down the slope there to collect some sand from Sword, rubbish. Joe's just striding down the slope to collect some sand from Gold Beach. So, and the sand is rather golden as well. Something that's interesting here that I wasn't fully aware of, but is pretty obvious, so they could get the maximum amount of kit on the beach as soon as possible, was doing this at lower tide. Clearly the tide does go quite out here, so if you come ashore on the water's edge there, you've got obviously a long way to get up, but once you're up and you're supported, you can get the kit in. Here's the water line here. The sand is dry up there, but the actual water line is here, and you can see how far out the sea is. It's about 60-70 yards at least, maybe 80-90 even. But anyway.
So here we are, 4th of June, and we're down at the battery just to the, if you're looking at the Normandy coast, to the right, and it's the battery fired on to Gold and Omaha beaches. I think it was called Longues-sur-Mer Battery. It was built late in 44, so start of 44, I know January, February time they started building it. It took 4 months in the end to build. So just obviously before the D-Day landings. Rommel was the one that wanted it built, and when it was completed, and say in that record time of 4 months, he said it was a fantastic piece of engineering work, and it was going to be like a good defensive position on this part of the coast. And it had to be because coming from that direction was the Canadian troops who landed down at the beach there, Juno Beach, Also, just further up in that direction, Gold Beach, so the British and the Free French, and then back round this way would have been the Americans, Omaha and Utah Beach. So, helicopter is going over there. But yeah, so as you can see, the sea is just in the distance there. I mean, it's a mile, 2 miles maybe more. Not that far at all. So these guns would have been needed to suppress and try to drive back the enemy into the sea, and also to try and destroy the ships, bringing them in as well. And as you can see, these guns are quite a large caliber, so they could easily reach out that far into the sea and do a lot of damage. So this is a view from on top of one of the casemates. This one's pretty much intact. I think on top of the roof here, they would have had I don't think they're having 88, probably too heavy, but definitely something like a 20mm. MG42, MG34 nests to protect obviously the actual gun. Got a bit of a reenactment cam going on right here, so get us in. There was a lot of these in and around France this year. One thing there is an abundance of is Willis Jeeps, which is this one here. Zoom in. That one just there. And Willis Jeep, there seems to be hundreds, maybe tens of hundreds travelling around France. They're obviously mass produced in the 30s, 40s, and used quite extensively across all campaigns. So that's the backdrop. So we're looking towards inland from the beaches. In this direction over here is Carentan and Saint-Mary-Église further up the coast. That's Saint-Mary-de-Mont. So obviously with the battles with the 101st Airborne, 82nd Airborne, mainly glider infantry, airborne landing brigades used, and then all the way over in this direction, I'll zoom in, sorry about my camera work, not the best, in that direction over there, it's Gold Sword and Juno, so Gold Sword where the British landed and moved inland towards that area over there where we're staying, and 6th Airborne Division had landed along with the rest of the Air Landing Brigade. So we're down at Arromanches Beach. This is where the Mulberry Harbour was built to get the heavy equipment off of the ships quicker and easier than just landing them on the beach. So say a Mulberry is say a man-made pier, man-made docks, as you can see there, and stretched all the way around, and it was a harbour. Unfortunately, there was a storm that wrecked the harbour, so they had to start again, patch it up. So it was successful because they managed to unload thousands of tons of equipment and ammunition, men, to push forward into France. Some ducks, amphibious vehicles, giving people a ride in the sea. They're, I guess, they're originals.
There it comes, the duck.
He's getting his sand now, as he's done on the 2 American beaches. He's got a scoop of sand. He's hoping he's going to get. There are some proper pots that you can get. He was going to get them in Arromanches, but he forgot to do it. So he's going to either get them at a shop near Sword Beach, or if he fails to do that, he'll go on the internet. This object behind Joe here looks like part of the defences. I can't imagine it's anything but. So quite what it is, I'm not sure. It looks like it's probably a post of some description. It could well be an anti-aircraft thing, because there's something in the middle there, and it's a octagonal format. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yeah, it's an octagonal object. So someone will know what these objects are, but there's you can see here, there's other stuff that's been destroyed on the beach. So this is clearly wreckage of defence works. Been absolutely walloped. Now, unlike the earlier stuff that I declared hadn't been knocked out, these clearly have, whatever they are. They have absolutely been hammered. There are rocks here, so don't mistake that for concrete detritus, but the regular slabs and pieces are definitely man-made. They're definitely man-made. There's an object here which looks suspiciously man-made. It's too regular and it's got sides to it, so that's also part of it. But there's a rock under that, but the bit on top is definitely man-made and would have formed part of the defences. I personally have no idea what it is, but definitely it's part of the defences. We've had a closer examination, and amongst all this rock, there is actually man-made objects. For instance, that piece, that piece, that piece, that piece. But then you come to objects like that, which is a rock. That's definitely a rock. Look at some of this. That's a rock, but it's surrounded by, that is a lump of concrete. That's a lump of concrete. So it's hard to distinguish amongst all this what looks like rubble on the beach, or if you didn't know that what the site was, you'd think it was a load of rocks covered in seaweed, is actually the remains of this defence work here. This was a much lighter defence work than those heavy gun emplacements at the site that we visited earlier today with the 4 6-inch naval guns. This site is clearly possibly lighter guns, or even just a machine gun post with maybe 4 machine guns, or even a couple of machine guns, but it's a lot lighter, and hence it would be much more susceptible to any kind of hit. Would do this certain kind of destruction, or would perform this kind of destruction, and it's gone all over the show. And it's gone backwards because the shells come in and the explosions pushed it backwards towards the towards the shoreline. We're now arrived at Juno Beach. There's a Churchill tank with a spigot mortar on the turret. I forget the name of this type of tank. I'll find out in a minute. I shall get my special advisor to tell me what it is. This tank was a Canadian commanded Churchill. It only got 100 yards off the beach when it went into a pond, I believe. It's a assault pioneer or assault engineer tank, so it was meant to sort of spearhead things and get inland. Unfortunately, a chunk of the crew got killed and 2 survived. There's the tank itself being dredged out of a pond that it was in November 1976, so 32 years after it sadly went into the drink. And these 2 lads here are the 2 survivors. The rest of their crew were killed on the day, but this is I believe would have been about 1977 when the tank had been renovated to the state that it is now and placed on the slab, the monumental slab. Yeah, the 2 survivors. That's the tank. I forget what this tank is called. The Crocodile was the flame-throwing tank. I'm not sure what the one that the engineers used, and I'm almost certain that is a spigot mortar on there. Right, here's Joe striding manfully out on Juno Beach, and he's going to do the same once again. This is his penultimate collection of sand. The final one is Sword Beach. Obviously you'll be aware that he's done the collection on Utah Beach and Omaha Beach, and earlier he did, there he goes, he's got the scooping it up, he's got the pot, and there it is. Shows it, there it is. Here we are, there's a monument there. This is on, as I say, Juno Beach. I used to work with a gentleman called Ernest Sabaton, and he got, I don't know which beach he landed on, but he was in an Irish rifle battalion, although he was an Englishman, and Ernie was bicycle equipped, as were the rest of his brigade. And the brigadier, or the commander of the brigade, was the first to chuck the folding bike into the sea, because apparently they'd been shipped onto not only the wrong sector, had been sort of the current or whatever had moved them off course, but there was rocks and they were couldn't get into shore, and so sort of chest deep in water, the colonel, with a few expletives, decided that's it chaps, and the bike went into the drink, the folding bike, and so somewhere out there, we don't know where, we don't know when, but there are many hundreds of folding bikes. It was a brilliant idea, because we're going to try and do something similar to what the Japanese did, which was to cycle inland behind the Germans and hold a a position on which the other troops could advance to, but it never came to it. Ernie, sadly, was blown up. We can't determine where the spot is because Ernie's been dead 30 odd years, but unfortunately we're not going to find where, but he was blown up by the event of him and his comrades. I don't know whether it was a squad or a couple of squads of Tommies, and they all dived, probably a squad, they all dived under an abandoned half track. It then got hit by a decent sized round, whether it was mortar or artillery, blown to bits. Everyone was killed. Ernie survived with 70% burns. He spent 9 months in hospital, and that was the rest of his war, and he declared he never saw a German, in spite of being ashore at least a month. Never saw, that was in front of Caen, by the way, and he never saw a German. Saw lots of bullets, or at least lots of munitions coming his way, but he never saw the one coming that blew him his comrades to bits and badly wounded him. And that was his World War II. He did actually do service after that, and he ended up in the Istrian Peninsula, Istria, which is nowadays part of Slovenia, at Pula, or Pola, which was a naval base, trying to keep the partisans, the Yugoslavs, out of there. He had a sidearm and a walking stick and a beret. He was with. That's all they had. It was the most innocuous way of confronting the partisans, but they kept them at bay, and then it was all sorted out by treaty after the war. Okay, a bit of an anecdote, but it was worthwhile because it's another Normandy experience.